Welcome to Amazing Cultivation Simulator. This is a new RimWorld-like on Steam, and it's got great reviews. Everybody loves it. So I'm going to tell you why it's terrible. Not really. It's a beautiful game. It's got some great new ideas, some great takes on some old ideas, and a lot of really compelling stuff in it. But it has the worst UI and game flow I have ever seen in a base builder. And this is some stuff I've talked about before. I have videos about these exact concepts we're going to be talking about. Now that I've got a game that shows how not to do it so clearly, it's worth looking at it specifically. Problem is, it might all be in my head, because this game is getting great reviews, and the negative reviews sure don't talk about the UI or the game flow. But to my mind, that's because these are multipliers. The people who hate something about this game wouldn't have noticed that thing they hated if the game let them come to grips with it easier and better. If there was better game flow and better UI, they would not have even noticed the thing they didn't like. That's my excuse anyway, but maybe I'm just delusional. Either way, let's talk about my delusions. So, this is the game. Looks like RimWorld, but prettier, and that's basically what it is. But it has some really amazingly bad implementations, so let's talk about it. Game flow is the way that the game helps you to recurse. So basically, if you are trying to build a base, you build a base, and then the game has some sort of way of telling you whether what you've built is good or bad. For example, you'll get attacked by enemies, and that means that you'll be able to see how well you fare against the enemies. You can build your base so that you can fight them more easily, put down some traps, make sure you've got people on guard, have these giant gates to prevent people from coming in, whatever it is. And then the game will attack you again, and you'll get to see that had a certain effect, and you can polish it and try again. That kind of game flow is core to what makes base building games work. The game tells you how well you've built something by letting you see something happen. This game doesn't do that. There's a lot of reasons that it doesn't. The first reason is it doesn't actually pause. So if you get attacked in RimWorld or Dwarf Fortress, the game will stop. If you're going like a day a second, the game will say, "Whoop, something's happened, we better stop." That doesn't happen in this game. So if you don't notice that someone's been attacked, they can fight on their own without you having any input, without anybody coming to their rescue, without anybody responding in any way, for hours and hours and hours until you notice. And this is a problem because the combat in this game is brutal. You see this cat over here? I had my master martial artist with his key mastery and his artifact sword come over here and kill the cat, because I know that this cat could kill any of my other people. All of my other people, who are all aspiring martial artists, would have gotten badly maimed if they tried to fight that cat. I know that because they tried to fight this cat and got badly maimed. The only way that you can be safe in this world is by having your master martial artist super cultivator manually defeat every single animal larger than a chicken. Oh, and you need to be careful if you're hunting chickens, because I've had people die hunting chickens. The chicken just pecked them to death. It's not something that I can build a base around. I can't build a defense with the idea in mind that, there'll be someone to rescue or whatever, because the game won't pause. If you get attacked by a cat, it's going to be outside your base, and I can't arrange for someone else to be nearby to give you backup because they won't automatically go and give backup, and the game won't pause. There's no base building involved here. So the only thing you can do is manually hunt them all down with your overpowered super characters, because that's the only option, and that's not going to be base building. That's just tedious clicking. Once you get into more powerful enemies, like, say, superpowered martial artists, you'll quickly find that your base building does not matter because they can all fly. Which means they can go anywhere and drop into any room. You can't build a base around that concept. I mean, there are a couple of things you can do, but by and large, you can't. None of your walls are walls. None of your doors can be locked because they can just fly. These things really hamstring any attempt to make base building and combat have any sort of relation to each other. It's really unfortunate. You cannot use the base building to help with the combat, and you can't use the combat to test your base building. They are completely separated. But the base building is interesting. There are a lot of fun concepts here. These bases don't have technology, they have Feng Shui. So the rooms have different kinds of key patterns and stuff, right? That sounds kind of fun, kind of interesting. Unfortunately, the game doesn't show you any of that. Let's look over here at these rooms. I built this base relatively recently because my last base fell apart. Would you like to know why my last base fell apart? All of my people started dying of heart attacks in the middle of the night. And when I looked up why, it said haunted house. The heck? There are no ghosts. Nobody had died on that map, no humans. Turns out the problem was that I had built rooms with such bad feng shui that people had heart attacks sleeping in them. So I looked up how to do it. This is how you do it. Doors always face south. You don't use metal walls. I didn't tell you to use metal walls. You just built them out of metal yourself, which we'll get to later. But how can you know whether or not a bedroom design is good or bad? Well, the game sort of tells you. After about 3 hours, you can build this, and then you can click on this button, and you can see how the bed is green. Green means it's auspicious. So you know you've done an okay job. But it doesn't tell you why it's auspicious. It doesn't tell you what part of this room is good feng shui and bad feng shui. It's just like, oh, yeah, I guess you did good. So if you happen to know all of the theoretical stuff, you can sort of get away with it, but you can't really polish it. You can't be like, oh, well, I know how this is going to work, so I'm going to put this next to this. And did that work? Yeah. No, it's all very muddy. How much is this wood oil lamp adding to the auspiciousness? How much is this dressing table adding to the auspiciousness? How about this door? Look, the door is yellow. Does that mean it's bad? I can't tell. I don't know. And we've got some stuff that's really green, like this. This is super auspicious. Why is this auspicious? And if it's auspicious, why is it red? Look over here. This is inauspicious. Why is this inauspicious? You want to tell me? No? I'll tell you why. Stoves create a fire element, either here or here. I don't know which, probably here. And according to this giant sheet, the fire element eats earth, I guess, and doesn't like metal, maybe? I don't know. But that means that the stone floor I put in to prevent fires is apparently getting eaten by the stove. I honestly don't know. I built a stove out of stone, so maybe that's the problem. Over here, I have these spirit wood elements. These are technically just lumber, but because they're magic lumber, they can absorb ki. And I was like, oh, cool. Let's go ahead and set them up in a place where they'll have access to ki. Now, these are wood, and therefore you want to give them water, right? So I put them on the shore, and I planted lots of little water plants around them with the idea that it would help them to absorb ki, and it seems to have. I don't know why they're absorbing 0 now, maybe just because I loaded the game just now, but they absorbed quite a few. They've absorbed at least 150 ki since I put them here. But I have no idea how much ki they're getting from the various parts of this setup. Does having the two of them next to each other interfere? Is it the plants or the water or both? Now, showing how this works shouldn't be that challenging. If a door is giving me so much bad ki that people are going to die, then the door should be flashing red or should have poisonous smoke flowing through it or whatever. And when I click on it, it should say, warning, this thing is killing people. And if I am over here looking at this and it's absorbing ki, well, guess what? There should be little sparkles of ki getting absorbed so I can see how frequently it absorbs ki from which elements. And they can be white if they are, sparkly white color if they are good matches. And then they can be like a dirty red if they're bad matches or whatever, right? Something that tells you whether or not things are going well or things are going poorly. Made a little bit more complicated because of the color scheme of the elements, but still doable. Those things don't happen. It's the game is not interested in telling you whether what you've done is better or worse than what you did before. So you can't get into that loop. You can't get into that cycle of refining your base because you got no idea what's going on. You got no idea whether your base is better or worse than your last base, except in the most blunt force way possible. This extends to nearly everything. For example, here's Mao Yan. She's the super martial artist. She's my only one because this is a new base. There she is. And what's her superpower like? Well, here is her cultivation. What are these? Well, some of them are fairly obvious, right? Like aid is when you have a master and I don't have one. Mood is how good of a mood you're in. Ki is about whether your environment works. And in this case, for some reason, she's out here on the dirt. I don't know why. Dirt is not a great match because she's a fire character. She needs wood. That's why her room is full of wood. And, the ki is like 5-star there, or 3-star, I forget. What about law? How well the character's main stats and the cultivation law matches. What does that mean? Here's our law. I don't see any signs that there's like any sort of description of what that is. Well, it turns out that if you look at the law here, you can see there's this strange little stat arrangement here, and you can sort of see whether or not your character's stats match up. And her stats are pretty good. She's got potential that's too high and charisma that's too high, but everything else matches up okay. But this is something that you don't get unless you're really, really looking for it, and it's not clear, is it? The game doesn't say, oh, your law is +2 because you've got a good match on these 4 stats and a bad match on these 2 stats. It just says, well, you know the theory, work it out yourself. Same with elements, same with everything. And actually, it was the element that I was talking about earlier. I got them backwards because it doesn't help. This is a place where she'd have good element. The ki would probably be good here too, just because the spirit wood is, in theory, very high ki. It's at 200, so that's enough for someone who's just getting started, I think. But I have no way of knowing. The game won't tell me. Adding on to this, there are a number of smaller UI problems that I've talked about many, many times. For example, this has the serious problem of splitting everything apart. So if we want to build these floors, we need something called offcuts. How do we make offcuts? Well, we click on this wood handcraft station, we click on produce, and we select an offcut. Every potential piece of wood that you might be able to turn into splinters is here. It's not even wood, it's also stone. This way of listing things is the worst, and I've talked about this extensively in the past. This is not how you do it, especially if you're going to allow modding, which I don't think these people will because I think it's a Chinese company and they're not real big on that. But look at all of these things, and it's like, well, what are you going to be creating offcuts from? I guess wood? Sure, why not? Here is the infuriating part of that. I want to make a sword, right? Let's go over and make a sword. What sort of setup do we have for making a sword? Oh, look, we right click on it and choose a material, which is obviously so much better. Why is the offcuts menu so shitty? Half of the menus use this list everything, and then people can pick whatever it is they happen to want. And the other half are like, oh yeah, you pick the thing you want to make, and then you right click to pick a material. I think the reason it's like that is because they started off focusing on tablets rather than PC. And so therefore there is no right click. But you can still do like a long click or a secondary click, and that's the case with a sword, for example. If we were to tell them to develop a bow here, we can then change what the bow is made out of by clicking on this. I just don't have any options. Let's show a menu with a sword here. Here's the sword, right? I can click this. I thought I could click that and change what it was made of. Maybe not. But the point here is that you can pick a material later. There's no big reason that you have to pick it on the first click. A long click is something you can easily do on a tablet. There's no reason to make it require a right click if you're worried about that. Similarly, how would you tell Xiao here to equip this spear? Well, in RimWorld and in just about every other game, you would right-click on the spear and click Equip. But when you right-click on the spear, all it does is deselect everything. And again, I think that's because they didn't build this with right-clicks in mind. So you've got to click on Equip, which is F2, obviously, and then click on the spear. These are more basic UI issues. These don't really affect the game flow so much. So in my mind, they're not as important. I would just like it to be much more streamlined and easy to figure out. But the real core problems here are simply that the things that the game wants you to become better at, it doesn't tell you anything about. You can't tell how good your setup is. And that is the worst possible result if the game is about making better setups. I honestly don't know how this game has gotten such good reviews when it's so hard to polish your base building. I don't know whether people just haven't noticed their bases are terrible or whether they all went through like the full tutorial set, which is like an hour and a half of the game talking down to you. I don't know. I'd be interested in knowing if someone else has given this game a really good review. I wonder whether they've run into these problems and have overcome them, or whether they're just so compelled by the game's ideas that they don't mind. It's interesting to me. Yeah, that's, I guess, all I wanted to talk about. Have a good one.